Hi, my name is Grace, and I'm 33 years old. For the past 72 hours, I've been sitting beside my daughter Ella's hospital bed, watching the steady rhythm of machines that are currently keeping her alive. She's only 13, but a car accident has left her in a coma, her small body bruised and broken, lying still in the ICU. I haven't slept properly in 3 days. My eyes burn, my body aches, and my heart feels like it's been torn open. All I can do is sit, hold her hand gently between mine, and wait for any sign that she's still in there, still fighting. I was staring blankly at the monitors when my phone buzzed in my lap. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another meal delivery text or hospital update, but when I looked down, I saw my mother's name, Karen. I hesitated, then answered, hoping she was finally calling to ask about Ella. Instead, her voice came through the line, crisp and calm. Your sister's wedding is tomorrow. I need you here early to help set up. For a moment, I couldn't respond. I blinked at the beeping monitors as if they could tell me I'd misheard. Mom, I said slowly, I'm at the hospital. Ella is still unconscious. I can't leave her. Her response sent a chill down my spine. Grace, you hovering over her doesn't change anything. The doctors and nurses are doing their jobs. This wedding is important. If you don't come, we'll have to reconsider certain financial arrangements. You know what that means. I didn't say another word. I ended the call, stared at the phone in disbelief, then deleted her number. That was the moment I knew something had broken. Not just inside me, but between me and my family. Growing up, I learned very early that approval from my mother came with strings. Karen was the type of woman who believed in perfection, the kind you could see, judge, and measure. Our home in suburban Connecticut looked like a magazine spread, not a place to grow or make mistakes. And it was always clear that my younger sister Ashley was the shining star. From her perfect report cards to her piano recitals to her flawless social manners, Ashley could do no wrong. Me? I wasn't a rebel or troublemaker. I got decent grades, played soccer, and helped around the house. But in my mother's eyes, I was always just not quite enough. Why can't you be more like your sister? Was a common refrain, echoing through my childhood like a taunt I could never outrun. If Ashley came home with an A+, it was a disappointment. If she won an award, my efforts were overlooked. Our father, Richard, tried in his quiet way to buffer some of Mom's harshness. He'd give me a small nod or a quiet good job when he saw me trying. But he was always working late or traveling for business, and honestly, his presence, though well-meaning, was never enough to offset the dominance of my mother's expectations. I grew up with the clear understanding that love in our house had conditions, and my performance never quite met them. In high school, I stopped trying to compete and instead started finding my own path. I discovered photography, capturing real, unfiltered beauty instead of the staged kind my mother valued. I began volunteering at an animal shelter where dogs wagged their tails simply because I sat beside them. Those were the first places I started to feel like I was enough, just as I was. I never stopped wanting my mother's approval, but I slowly began building a life where I didn't need it to breathe. College offered a kind of freedom I'd never known. I studied liberal arts with a focus on design and photography. It was there during my sophomore year that I met Eric. He was smart, grounded, kind, and unlike anyone I had ever known. He was already running a small logistics company he'd co-founded, ambitious yet humble. Eric noticed me, not for who he thought I should be, but for who I actually was. He laughed at my dry humor, listened to me ramble about lighting and angles, and never once compared me to anyone, especially not to Ashley. When we got engaged at 22, I was terrified to tell my parents. I already knew what my mother would say. And I was right. You're throwing away your future, she said. What about grad school? You're settling. But Eric's family was the complete opposite. Warm, welcoming, full of genuine curiosity and kindness. I never felt out of place at their dinner table, never had to prove my worth. That contrast became a new measuring stick for me. We got married in a small ceremony, simple, heartfelt, and nothing like the grand spectacle my mother would have wanted. She came, of course, but with tight smiles and veiled criticisms. The food was passable, the venue quaint. My father pressed a check into my hand during the reception and whispered, "I'm proud of you, kiddo," when she wasn't looking. I kept that check, but it was his words that I held on to. A year later, Ella came into our lives. She was perfect. A mix of both of us, my green eyes, Eric's warm smile, and a heart that seemed too big for her tiny body. Even Karen seemed to soften a little, though it came with unsolicited advice and plenty of undermining remarks. "You're holding her too much," she'd say. Or, "That pediatrician doesn't seem seasoned. You should see Dr. Blake instead." Still, we made it work. Eric's business was growing. I did part-time photography gigs, picked up side admin work, and focused on being the best mom I could. We weren't rich, but we were happy and full of dreams. Then, when Ella was 5, everything changed. Eric was at a business meeting across town. He was supposed to be home for dinner. Instead, I got a call from the hospital. A heart attack. Sudden. Massive. He didn't survive the ambulance ride. Just like that, my world imploded. One minute, I was a wife and mother with plans for a weekend trip to the aquarium, and the next, I was a 31-year-old widow holding our daughter's tiny hand as she asked why Daddy wasn't coming home. I don't know how I survived those first few months. Grief was a storm, and I was drowning. But Ella needed stability, and I had no choice but to stand. I moved us to a smaller apartment. I got a steady job as a school administrative assistant. I kept doing small photo gigs on weekends. Eric's life insurance helped us get by financially, but the emotional void was vast. That's when my mother stepped back in, not with support, but with control. "You should move back in with us," she said. "A child needs a stable home." When I refused, she started buying Ella things I couldn't afford and saying things like, "Mommy means well, but Grandma can actually give you what you need." She scheduled events during my rare days off with Ella, making me the bad guy when I couldn't rearrange my life. But I put up with it for Ella. I knew she loved her grandparents, and I didn't want to take that away. I thought I could manage it. The subtle digs, the comparisons to Ashley, who by then was planning a lavish wedding with her fiancé, Justin. Every family gathering became a silent competition, and I was always losing. Still, I tried to keep peace. But everything shifted again when that car hit my daughter and threw her into the ICU. Suddenly, everything that once seemed tolerable felt intolerable. Every decision, every breath, became about Ella. And I had no space left for anyone who couldn't see that. I didn't know it then, but that phone call from my mother, so cold, so stunningly indifferent, was the beginning of the end of everything I had tolerated for so long. As I sat beside Ella's unmoving body in the ICU, I felt like the entire world had narrowed to just this room. The sounds of beeping machines, the low hum of oxygen, and the occasional shuffle of nurses had become my only reality. I didn't want food, I didn't want sleep. I just wanted her to wake up. The doctors had explained everything in gentle but clinical terms. She had suffered a traumatic brain injury from the collision. The swelling in her brain had been serious enough to require emergency surgery. She had a broken femur, cracked ribs, and bruises covering half her body. They had put her in a medically induced coma to help her brain heal, to give her the best possible chance. But there were no guarantees. "We'll watch for signs of improvement," they said. "The next 48 hours are critical." I clung to those words like they were rope keeping me from sinking completely. And yet, nothing changed. Day turned to night, and then back again, and Ella didn't move. People came and went. The ICU staff rotated in shifts. Some of them, like Nurse Lisa, were gentle and kind, explaining everything in ways I could understand. She offered me coffee, a blanket, even insisted I go take a shower in the family restroom. "You need to take care of yourself too," she said softly. I nodded, but didn't move. What if Ella woke up while I was gone? What if something went wrong in those 10 minutes? I couldn't bear the thought. Ben's parents came to visit, Frank and Jenna. They brought clean clothes and my laptop. Ben stood at the doorway, pale and shaken, unable to make eye contact. I walked over and hugged him tightly. "It's not your fault," I whispered. "I know you think it is, but it's not." He nodded stiffly, and Jenna led him away. My coworkers dropped off food I barely touched. Ella's school friends sent get-well cards. But the silence from my own mother was deafening. Not a single visit. Not a call to ask how her granddaughter was doing. Nothing. Until the wedding entered the conversation. Ashley was getting married that weekend. A grand ceremony. Of course. Designer dress, string quartet, perfect weather forecast. It was all Karen had ever wanted. And apparently, she expected me to help make it picture perfect, even while my daughter lay unconscious and hooked to a ventilator. That demand was not just cruel, it was a wake-up call. I spent hours beside Ella, holding her hand, brushing her hair gently away from her bandaged forehead, talking to her like she could hear every word. I told her about the robot kit waiting for her at home. I reminded her of our upcoming trip to the Science Museum, the one we'd been saving for since February. I told her how brave she was, how proud her dad would be. I told her I was right there, that I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't realize how far I'd drifted from my own emotions until my father called. He spoke softly, as he always did. "Your mother told me what happened," he said. "She says you were disrespectful." I laughed bitterly. "Did she tell you she threatened to cut off Ella's college fund if I didn't show up to help with wedding decorations?" His silence said everything. He hadn't known, or at least hadn't known the whole truth. "She said you were being dramatic, that the doctors are doing their job and there's nothing you can do by sitting there." I felt something snap inside me then. A quiet, subtle snap like a thread breaking in the cold. "Dad," I said, "Ella might not wake up. The doctors don't know yet if she'll have brain damage. I can't leave her." "I won't." He sighed. "I understand. Your mother, she doesn't deal well with things she can't control." "That's not an excuse anymore," I said. "She hasn't asked about Ella once." "I know." His voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry." I sat with those words for a long time after we hung up. I thought about every other moment where my mother had minimized my pain or pushed her agenda over my needs. When Eric died, she hadn't come over to hold me. She came over with real estate listings and brochures for private schools. "You can't possibly raise a child in this part of town," she'd said. "You need to think ahead." She hadn't understood that all I was thinking about was how to help Ella fall asleep without crying for her father every night. My mother had always had a plan, for me, for Ashley, for the image of our family. And I had always been the stray piece, the variable she couldn't quite control. Maybe that's why I was punished every time I chose something different. And this time, I had chosen Ella. Not the family name, not the public perception, not the party. Just my daughter. That night, I sat beside Ella and whispered every story I could think of. I talked about the time she fell into the pond at the park, soaked and laughing. The day she got her first telescope and insisted there were aliens in her closet. The way Eric used to call her Ella Bug and pretend she had secret superpowers. I kept talking even when my voice cracked and my body ached, because I had nothing else to give her except my presence. And somehow, I believed that mattered. The morning of Ashley's wedding dawned clear and golden, the kind of spring day people pray for when planning outdoor ceremonies. The hospital, by contrast, remained unchanged, dimly lit corridors, antiseptic air, and the relentless beeping of machines. I hadn't moved from Ella's side. The doctors had started to reduce her sedation the day before, looking for any signs of consciousness. Her vitals were improving slowly, and the swelling in her brain was going down. Still, she hadn't woken up. Nurse Lisa insisted I take a quick shower. 20 minutes, Grace. "I'll stay right here with her," she promised. I hesitated, then finally nodded. As I walked out of the room, my phone rang again. My mother's name flashed across the screen. I took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway before answering. "Grace," Karen said briskly, "it's the big day. I hope you've changed your mind." Her voice was filled with rehearsed calm, like she was ordering flowers instead of speaking to the mother of a child in intensive care. "I'm not coming," I said quietly. "Ella hasn't woken up. I can't leave her." Karen sighed, like I was an inconvenience. "The doctors are watching her. There's nothing more you can do. Ashley will be heartbroken if you're not there." The guests will ask questions. I've told everyone you'd be arriving by noon. I clenched my jaw, trying not to shout in the hallway. Mom, my daughter is in a coma. She's got tubes coming out of her mouth. She might have permanent brain damage. And you're asking me to smile for pictures? Her voice sharpened. That's enough, Grace. After everything your father and I have done for you. The trust fund for Ella. The support over the years. If you refuse to come today, don't expect anything from us moving forward. There it was, the ultimatum. For a moment, I felt like the little girl who used to sit on the stairs, listening to my mother praise Ashley for her piano recitals while ignoring my soccer medals. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I looked through the small window into Ella's room, where Lisa was adjusting her blanket. My daughter lay motionless, her chest rising and falling with the help of machines. This was my reality now, not Karen's fantasy of family perfection. You're right, Mom, I said softly. This is my choice. And I choose Ella. Not your party. Not your money. Just her. I ended the call and deleted her number again. This time, there was no hesitation. The silence that followed was both terrifying and liberating. I'd just cut off my mother in the most permanent way I ever had. There would be consequences. I didn't doubt that. But I also didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I had drawn a line that would not be erased. Back in the room, I returned to Ella's side and whispered, I'm still here, baby. I'll always be here. That afternoon, I received a flurry of texts from family members. Vanessa's husband, Justin, wrote, Your mother is devastated. Ashley was in tears walking down the aisle. You could have come just for the ceremony. Then, we saved you a seat next to the photographer. Another relative wrote, Everyone was asking where you were. So awkward. No one, not a single person, asked how Ella was doing. Even my father eventually called. Your mother is very upset, he began, and I closed my eyes, already exhausted by the conversation. Dad, Ella still hasn't woken up. I haven't left this room in 4 days. And she's upset about what? That I didn't show up to hold a bouquet? She says you've disrespected the family, he said quietly. That it reflects badly on all of us. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the parking lot. Does she know Ella's EEG readings haven't improved? That we still don't know if she'll be able to walk again? Or think clearly? Or speak? Silence. She's focused on the wedding, he said at last. She's trying to manage everything. She always is, I said. Even at my wedding. Even at Eric's funeral. She managed. But never cared. I'm sorry, he said. I'll try to come by tomorrow. That evening, Nurse Lisa gave me a look. Grace, she said gently, you need to eat. You can't pour from an empty cup. I nodded. She offered to stay with Ella while I went to the cafeteria. For the first time in 4 days, I stepped away. I grabbed a sandwich and sat near the window, staring blankly at people going about their lives, walking in and out of the hospital. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, mine was frozen in time. At 5:20 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A message from Ashley. You could have at least sent a card. Or flowers. Something. That was it. I turned the phone off completely. I had nothing left to give them. 20 minutes later, I was back by Ella's side, just in time for a nurse to come in with her charts. Her vitals are improving, Lisa said. We're seeing some movement in her brain activity. My heart skipped. What kind of movement? Too early to say, but it's a good sign. I sat down, took Ella's hand in mine, and whispered, I don't know if you can hear me, but I hope you know I picked you. Over everything else. Always. The next several hours passed in a strange, suspended quiet. The hospital grew dimmer as evening fell, and the voices in the hallway softened to a low murmur. I sat in the recliner next to Ella's bed, holding her hand and watching the monitor screens like they were magic mirrors. Every beep felt louder now. Every change in the rhythm of her breathing made my heart leap. Lisa had explained earlier that the changes in her brain patterns meant her body was slowly responding, that she might be drifting toward consciousness. But there were no guarantees. It's a marathon, not a sprint, she'd said, offering a tired but hopeful smile. By 8 p.m., Lisa's shift had ended, and a new nurse, Kevin, had taken over. He was calm and quiet, the kind of presence that didn't fill the room with noise but with steadiness. He checked Ella's vitals, reviewed the chart, and noted the same improvements Lisa had seen. "She's trending in the right direction," he said. "Let's hope her body keeps leading her mind back." I appreciated his quiet optimism. I was just about to settle back into my seat when something shifted, something subtle, something small. I felt the lightest pressure around my fingers. I looked down. Ella's hand had twitched. My breath caught. I leaned closer. "Ella?" I whispered, barely daring to say her name. Her fingers moved again, slightly but deliberately. I stood so fast the chair scraped loudly behind me. "Kevin!" I called out, voice shaking. She moved. He was by her side instantly, scanning the monitor, checking her reflexes. "That's real," he confirmed. "I'll page Dr. Reed." The neurologist arrived within minutes. Dr. Reed was always calm, always composed. He performed a series of assessments, checking Ella's pupils, her reflexes, her response to touch. "We're seeing positive neurological signals," he said. "This is promising. We'll continue reducing sedation and monitor for more signs of consciousness overnight." After he left, I sank back into the chair, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. I held Ella's hand again and leaned close to her ear. "You're doing great, sweetheart. I'm right here, okay? Just come back to me. There's no rush. I'll be here." The rest of the night passed with me half asleep in the chair, half awake in worry. Around 4 a.m., Kevin gently nudged me. "She stirred again," he said. I was instantly alert. I turned toward her and saw it, the flutter of her eyelids. Weak, slow, but there. "Ella," I whispered. Her brows furrowed slightly. Her fingers flexed, her body shifted just enough for me to know this wasn't a reflex. She was trying. She was fighting. I pressed the call button, and within seconds, a flurry of motion took over the room. Dr. Reed returned, examined her again, and this time confirmed it. "She's beginning to wake up," he said. "We'll continue monitoring closely, but this is a very encouraging sign." By sunrise, Ella's eyes had opened fully, though they were hazy and unfocused. Her gaze drifted around the room, eventually landing on my face. I leaned over her, holding back a sob. "Hi, baby," I said. "You're okay. You're safe. I'm right here." Her lips moved slightly, dry and soundless, but her eyes filled with recognition. She squeezed my hand, weak, but intentional. The ventilator still prevented her from speaking, but in that moment, we didn't need words. Later that morning, Dr. Reed assessed her again and gave the go-ahead to remove the ventilator. The process was slow, careful. Ella's throat was sore and raw, but after a sip of water, she managed a whisper. "Mom." That one word undid me. I broke down, tears pouring silently as I cradled her hand in mine. "I'm here," I told her. "I never left." A little while later, she asked, barely above a whisper, "Did I miss the wedding?" Her voice was thin but steady. I looked at her, stunned. "What?" She looked at me, confused. "Grandma said I might miss it. That you were supposed to help." I took a breath, steadying myself. "Yeah, it happened yesterday. But I stayed here. I stayed with you." She blinked at me for a long time. "You didn't go?" I shook my head. "No. You were more important." Her lips quirked, the ghost of a smile. "Good," she whispered. That single word filled me with more validation than any family gathering ever had. My daughter knew. Even in her unconscious state, she knew who had stayed, who had chosen her. Around noon, the hospital room door opened without a knock. My mother walked in, followed by Ashley. I stiffened. Ella's grip on my hand tightened. Karen glanced around, noting the machines, the dim lighting, the lingering fatigue in my eyes. "There you are," she said, as if I had simply forgotten to RSVP. "We've been trying to reach you." "I turned my phone off," I replied. She glanced at Ella and gave a rehearsed smile. "Hello, sweetheart. You gave us quite a scare." Her voice was soft, overly sweet. To me, she said under her breath. We need to speak. Outside. I'm not leaving her, I said. It's okay, Mom, Ella rasped. I'm awake now. I kissed her forehead and followed them to the hallway, making sure I could still see Ella through the glass. Karen turned to me, her expression steely. Your behavior yesterday was completely unacceptable. Ashley was in tears. You humiliated the family. My daughter was in a coma, I said calmly. She might have died. I wasn't going to leave her for photos and cake. Ashley crossed her arms. We understand you were worried, but weddings don't happen every day. No, I said. They don't. But neither do accidents like this. She needed me. And I was there. That's what matters. Karen's eyes narrowed. We've decided to revise some of the financial arrangements. The trust, the inheritance. You've made your position clear. So have you, I replied. And just like that, the last fragile thread snapped. I turned and walked back into Ella's room, where she was waiting, awake, alive, and more important than anything they could ever threaten to take away. The hospital room felt different now, not because the machines were gone or the walls had changed, but because Ella's eyes were open. She was still weak, her voice barely a whisper, but she was awake. Alive. Her slow blinking, the way her fingers curled gently around mine, even the raspy "I love you" she managed late that evening, it was more than I dared hope for days. I didn't care about the monitors or the medical jargon or the pain meds dripping into her fore. I cared that she saw me, that she knew I hadn't left. Dr. Reed was cautiously optimistic. She's not out of the woods, he said during morning rounds. But she's alert, responsive, and her neurological signs are stable. The next few days will tell us more. I nodded, clutching those words the way I'd once clung to updates about brain pressure levels and sedation levels. We were still in a storm, but now I could see the shore. By late morning, Ella was strong enough to ask for food. Just broth and juice, but the way she smiled when I held the cup to her lips made me want to cry all over again. She dozed between bites, and I let her sleep while I sat at her side, flipping through a notebook I'd been using to keep track of her progress. When Nurse Kevin came in to change her dressings, I stepped out to stretch my legs. In the hallway, I turned on my phone for the first time in over 24 hours. The notifications poured in, voicemails, texts, emails. I skimmed through them without responding. Most were from family members still fuming about my absence from the wedding. One message caught my eye. It was from Justin, Ashley's husband. This has gone too far, he wrote. Your mother has a migraine from all the stress. Ashley was so upset, she couldn't even enjoy her first dance. You've ruined everything. Maybe now you'll think before making everything about you. I stared at the screen, my hand shaking slightly. I wasn't angry, not really. I was numb. The absurdity of it all had passed the point of outrage and settled somewhere closer to disbelief. I slipped the phone into my bag and went back to Ella. Later that afternoon, my father arrived. I wasn't expecting him. He walked in slowly, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. His face was tired, lined with guilt and hesitation. Hey, he said softly. I thought I'd stop by and see how she's doing. Ella smiled faintly from the bed. Hi, Grandpa. He sat on the edge of the recliner, set the flowers down, and looked at me. Your mother, she told me about the argument. About the trust. I didn't say anything. She's upset, he continued. Feels like you disrespected her. I finally looked up at him. And, do you think I did? He paused, then shook his head. No. I think you did what any good mother would do. I let out a slow breath I didn't know I was holding. But she's serious about the consequences, he added. The financial side. She's revising the documents. I assumed as much, I said. I tried to talk her out of it, he said. But you know your mother. Yeah, I said, my voice quieter. I do. He looked over at Ella, who had drifted off again. She's a strong girl, like her mother. He stood, glanced toward the door, then looked at me again. I'm proud of you, Grace. For staying. For standing up for her. After he left, I sat in silence, letting his words sink in. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone in my family to say that. Not because I was second-guessing my decision. I wasn't, but because the weight of being the only one standing up against my mother's expectations had been unbearable at times. That night, Ella woke in a panic. The machines had startled her, and she didn't recognize where she was. I rushed to her side, calming her, rubbing her back, whispering softly. She gripped me tightly, tears in her eyes. "Don't leave," she whispered. "I won't," I promised. "Not ever." Once she calmed, she looked up at me. "Did Grandma really say you had to go to the wedding?" "Yes," I said gently. "She did. She said you'd regret it if you didn't." Her voice was small. "But you stayed." "I'll never regret that," I told her. "You're what matters, Ella. You're always what matters." She nodded, then closed her eyes again, her hand still wrapped around mine. The following days were a delicate balance of progress and patience. Ella was slowly improving. Each hour she stayed awake was a little longer than the last. She could now speak in short sentences, though her voice remained thin and gravelly. She tired easily and often drifted off mid-conversation, but her spirit, even in its most fragile state, was unmistakably present. She had questions, of course. What had happened? Why her legs ached? What all the machines were for? I answered everything gently, honestly, giving her space to process. And then came the questions about the wedding, about Grandma, about why I had stayed in the hospital and what I had missed. I treaded carefully, telling her the truth, without placing the burden of the family tension on her shoulders. She asked if Grandma was mad. I said probably, but that it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was awake and getting stronger. Each day brought more visitors from outside the family. My coworkers dropped by with fresh fruit and cards. Ben came with his mom, still nervous, his eyes wide and remorseful. Ella smiled when she saw him. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Don't be scared." The boy looked like he might cry as he nodded and gripped the side of her bed. It was the first time I saw a flicker of who she had been before the accident, a girl who made others feel safe, even when she herself wasn't. Meanwhile, the messages from my family dwindled, replaced by silence. There were no calls from Karen, no updates from Ashley. My father came a few more times, always kind, always trying to keep his loyalty divided evenly. He never spoke poorly of my mother, but I could see it in his eyes, the quiet recognition that something had shifted permanently. 3 days after Ella had woken up, I found an envelope on my doorstep at home. Inside was a formal notice from the family attorney. Karen had officially removed both Ella and me from the trust. I read the document twice, then calmly placed it in a drawer. There were no tears, no shock. I had seen it coming. And truthfully, I no longer cared. I had started applying for additional freelance work again, slotting photography clients in between my hours at the school once Ella returned home. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Earned, not granted. Loved, not leveraged. Back at the hospital, Dr. Reed was pleased with Ella's recovery. "She's responding well," he said during a morning consult. "No signs of cognitive deficits so far. She'll need physical therapy, of course, and she's still got a long way to go, but she's come through the worst." Hearing those words made me dizzy. Relief swelled in my chest, so sharp and full it felt like pain. I thanked him, blinking back tears, and returned to Ella's bedside with a real smile for the first time in weeks. But it wasn't over yet. That afternoon, I received a call from the hospital's front desk. "There's a visitor here asking to see you," the woman said politely. "She says it's urgent." When I asked who it was, my heart sank. It was Ashley. I almost said no. I wanted to say no, but something in me needed to see it through. I told them to send her up. She walked into the ICU waiting area in a tailored coat, makeup perfect, not a hair out of place, like the wedding photographer had just taken her picture, and she'd stepped off the page. But her eyes were puffy, her smile forced. "I came to see Ella," she said quickly. "If that's okay." "She's resting," I replied. "You can sit with her for a few minutes, but she's still recovering. No stress." Ashley nodded, then hesitated. I wanted to apologize for how everything went down. I folded my arms. You mean the part where the entire family pretended your wedding was more important than my daughter's life? She looked away. It wasn't meant to be like that. Mom said. Her voice trailed off. She told me you were being difficult. That Ella was stable. That you were using it as an excuse. I blinked. She said that while Ella was in a coma? Ashley looked embarrassed. I believed her. I shouldn't have. But everything was moving so fast and she was so sure. She said you'd come around, that you always did. I stared at her for a long moment. I didn't. And I won't. Ashley nodded. I see that now. We sat in silence for a minute. Then she asked quietly, Do you hate me? No, I said. But I hate the way we've all allowed Mom to dictate how we treat each other. I've spent my whole life chasing her approval. I'm done with that. Ashley's eyes welled up. She's angry. At me too. Because I invited myself here. She thinks I'm choosing sides. You are, I said gently. And you should. Choose what's right, not what keeps her happy. She wiped her eyes and stood. Can I tell Ella I'm glad she's okay? I nodded. Ashley stepped inside the room and sat by Ella's side for a few minutes. She spoke softly, showed her a photo of her dog, and promised to bring her a small gift next week. When she left, she said nothing else. Just gave me a quiet look that felt like a beginning, not an end. That evening, Ella looked at me with sleepy eyes. You're not mad anymore, she said. I'm tired, I replied. And free. The next few weeks passed in a kind of soft, steady rhythm. Ella was discharged from the hospital and began her outpatient physical therapy 3 times a week. Each session left her exhausted, but she faced it all with a kind of quiet determination I hadn't seen in her before. Watching her walk, even slowly and with help, filled me with pride that words couldn't touch. She never complained, not once. Even when her legs shook or when the pain made her wince, she kept going. I want to be strong again, she would whisper. Like you. At home, I rearranged everything. Her bed moved to the main floor temporarily, and I set up my work laptop near her so I could work while staying close. Our lives became smaller, simpler, but in the best way. Mornings were for therapy, afternoons for rest, and evenings for laughter, movies, and art. She started sketching again, first awkwardly, then with increasing confidence. Her first drawing after the accident was of a tree with one strong branch and a smaller branch leaning on it. That's us, she said with a soft smile. I framed it and hung it by the window. Meanwhile, I didn't hear a word from Karen. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a forwarded message from a relative. It was as if we had been scrubbed out of her world completely. I thought I'd feel more hurt about that, but I didn't. Not anymore. What I felt was peace. Ashley texted a few times, small things like asking for Ella's favorite candy or sharing photos from her honeymoon. Nothing heavy. I responded politely, but with distance. I wasn't ready to rebuild a sisterhood out of ashes, not when the fire was still fresh. Maybe one day, but not yet. Then, one cloudy Thursday morning, as I was helping Ella stretch her legs before a therapy session, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Karen stood there. She looked older, tired, but not defeated. Still impeccably dressed, with her lips pressed in that tight line she always used when she felt in control. She held a small paper bag in one hand and a white envelope in the other. Can I come in? She asked. I didn't move. Why? I wanted to talk, she said. And give Ella something. She's resting. Karen's eyes darted past me, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of the house that used to be her leverage. She held up the bag. Just cookies. Her favorite. Chocolate chip. She can't eat anything with nuts right now, I said. Doctor's orders. I didn't put nuts in them, she snapped, then softened. Please, Grace. I stepped aside, wordlessly. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the living room. It was neat, but not curated. Lived in. Warm. Full of plants and light and kid art. No trace of the cold, pristine aesthetic she always pushed on me. She sat on the edge of the couch, perched like she didn't want to touch anything. I've been thinking, she began.
About what you said.
About everything. I folded my arms. I didn't say much. You did all the talking. That's fair, she said, then placed the envelope on the coffee table. That's for you. It's not the trust. I'm not undoing that. But it's something. I didn't reach for it. Why now? She sighed. Because Ashley told me what Ella said. That you stayed. That you never left her side. Her voice cracked slightly. I thought I was teaching you to be strong. To not bend. But maybe I was just pushing you away. You weren't teaching, I said firmly. You were controlling. Karen flinched. You've always been dramatic. No, I said. You've always made me feel small for having emotions. For choosing love over appearances. For being a mother before being a daughter. She didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, I miss you. I sat down across from her. You miss the version of me that obeyed. Karen's eyes welled up. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, I replied. You can only start over. With honesty. And boundaries. She nodded slowly. Would you let me see Ella? I hesitated. Then said, not today. But maybe, if she wants to. Later. Karen stood, shoulders heavy. I'm sorry, she said. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted to try. When she left, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a check. $5,000. No note. No explanation. Just a figure that once would have meant everything, and now meant almost nothing. It was an attempt, not an apology. I set it aside. Ella stirred from the other room and called for me. I went to her and sat by her side. Was that Grandma? She asked sleepily. It was, I said. She brought cookies. Can I have one? Maybe later. Right now, rest. Ella smiled faintly and reached for my hand. I'm glad you're my mom. And in that moment, I didn't care about checks or trust funds or apologies too late. I had what mattered. I had her. The final weeks of summer passed like a quiet exhale. Ella's recovery accelerated in ways even Dr. Reed hadn't predicted. She still moved slowly, but there was strength returning to her frame, grit returning to her eyes. She could walk on her own now, though I still shadowed her like a safety net, always half a step behind. The first time she climbed the front porch stairs by herself, she turned and gave me a look I'll never forget. A look that said, see? I'm still here. She returned to school part-time in September. Her classmates greeted her like a hero, and she handled their attention with grace far beyond her 13 years. Ben walked beside her the first day back, carrying her backpack even though she didn't need the help. I stood outside the classroom door longer than I should have, watching her take her seat like it was just another Tuesday. But it wasn't. It was everything. At home, I found myself rebuilding too. I took on more freelance projects. Photography clients returned, referrals picked up, and for the first time in years, I was fully supporting us without a single safety net. No trust, no family backup, no fallback plan. And I wasn't scared. I was proud. I had built a life from scratch. A life rooted in love, not permission. Karen never visited again. She sent a holiday card in December, a generic message, no note inside, and I didn't respond. Ashley checked in occasionally, still towing the line between loyalty to our mother and something closer to truth. I didn't press her. I had no space in my heart left for rebuilding broken things that didn't want to be whole. One evening, as I folded laundry in the living room, Ella sat nearby with a sketchpad balanced on her knees. She had started a new habit, drawing the people she loved. That night, she handed me a portrait of us sitting on the hospital bed, her hand in mine, tubes still visible on her arms. You made me feel safe, she said, even when I didn't know where I was. I took the drawing in my hands, overwhelmed by the detail, the memory, the emotion it held. You made me brave, I whispered. In the following months, we created new traditions. Movie nights every Friday, pancakes on Sunday mornings, art shows in the backyard with fairy lights and music. We laughed more. We worried less. There was healing in the simplicity, in knowing no one could take this from us. And one night, Almost a full year after the accident, Ella stood beside me under a sky full of stars and said, "Do you think Grandma will ever say sorry?" I thought for a moment. Maybe. But that's not something we wait for. We just live. We move forward. She nodded.
Good.
I don't want to be stuck.
You're not, I said.
Neither of us are. We stood there for a long time, just the two of us. Mother and daughter. Survivors. Not of an accident, but of a family that failed to protect what mattered most. I used to think being cut off from the trust meant losing everything. Now I know it meant finding myself. I gained something far greater. The freedom to live on my terms, to love without conditions, to raise my daughter with the strength no amount of money could buy. This was never about the trust. It was about trust. And I had finally learned to give it to the one person who had earned it completely.
Ella.
If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life stories. Your support helps us bring you more inspiring content every week.